My life had been a dream turned nightmare. Once a loving wife, I dedicated myself to Lucas, my charming husband. But one fateful evening, that devotion shattered. The accident should have been my end, a selfless act to save Lucas from a speeding truck. Instead, it marked the beginning of my darkest chapter. When I woke in the hospital after the accident, I was paralyzed. Confined to a bed, I depended entirely on Lucas. But rather than gratitude or love, he gave me cruelty. Day by day, his taunts cut deeper, and then the truth emerged. Lucas had been having an affair with Isabel, a woman whose life seemed to radiate everything I had lost. One evening, after Lucas and Isabel's mocking laughter echoed in my ears, I slipped into a restless sleep. When I opened my eyes, the world had shifted. I wasn't myself anymore. I was Isabel. At first, I was disoriented, stumbling through the motions of Isabel's life. Her world was a maze of luxuries and lies, and I found myself unraveling her intricate web of deceit and manipulation just to keep up appearances. But soon, a fierce determination consumed me. I realized that this was more than a mere second chance. It was an opportunity to rebuild the life I deserved, one piece at a time. I began studying Lucas carefully, noting his routines, his interactions, and the subtle lies he thought he concealed so well. Isabel's proximity to him became my greatest weapon. Each interaction was a performance, a carefully orchestrated act where I feigned ignorance while quietly collecting evidence of his betrayals. I discovered hidden accounts, clandestine meetings, and whispered conversations that painted the true picture of the man I had once loved. The process wasn't without its challenges. There were moments I doubted myself, moments where the weight of living as someone else nearly crushed me. Isabel's life wasn't free from darkness either. Her friendships were shallow, and her allies were driven by selfish interests. I had to tread carefully, choosing my confidants wisely, and navigating her world with calculated precision. But as I gathered every damning detail of Lucas's lies, I felt an empowerment I hadn't known in years. The pain of my past life fueled my resolve, transforming me into someone who could not only survive, but thrive in the face of betrayal. Exposing Lucas wasn't just a goal. It became my purpose. One day, as I was meticulously organizing the evidence against Lucas, a disturbing thought struck me. If I was in Isabel's body, then where was the original Isabel? And more hauntingly, what had happened to my own body? The questions gnawed at me until I couldn't resist any longer. I grabbed Isabel's keys and drove to the hospital, a place she, or rather I, had visited many times before to check on my body. The staff didn't question me. They recognized Isabel and allowed me through without hesitation. I entered the ward and froze. There it was, my body. Pale, frail, and lifeless looking, it lay motionless on the hospital bed. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped closer. My body looked like a shadow of its former self, but the steady rise and fall of its chest confirmed it was alive. As I stood there, another thought emerged, one that sent shivers down my spine. If I was in Isabel's body, then Grace's soul must be trapped in mine. To confirm my suspicion, I leaned close and whispered softly into my own ear, speaking the tender words Lucas used to say to me back when I thought he loved me. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the heart monitor's rhythm quickened ever so slightly. It was her. A manic laugh bubbled up from my throat as I stood upright, my mind racing with the possibilities. "From now on," I said aloud, staring down at my former self, "I will come to visit you every day." The words felt like both a promise and a declaration of power. Grace's body was here, but I was free, and I intended to make the most of this twisted second chance. When I came back from the hospital, I met Lucas in the parking area. He greeted me with his usual smug smile, the one that once made me feel special, but now only fueled my loathing. As he approached, he leaned in and pressed a kiss to my cheek. I forced myself to stay calm, responding with a small, practiced smile. The moment we stepped into the elevator, his demeanor shifted. He began kissing my neck, his hands roaming possessively as he forced his body against mine. Disgust churned within me, but I let him do what he wanted, masking my revulsion to avoid arousing his suspicion. Every touch felt like a mockery of the life I had lost, but I endured it, knowing that my facade was my strongest weapon. Lucas didn't notice the fire simmering behind my eyes, or the way my hands clenched at my sides. To him, I was still Isabel, his accomplice, his lover, his pawn. Little did he know, the game had already begun to change. A week ago, when I first entered this body and opened my eyes, I found myself wrapped in a quilt, with Lucas sprawled beside me, his arm draped possessively over my waist. The intimate proximity made my skin crawl. The sheer audacity of him, lying there so comfortably as if nothing had happened, was too much to bear. Shock and disgust surged through me, and without thinking I shoved him hard, sending him tumbling off the bed. Lucas jolted awake, his face contorted with anger and confusion. "Are you mad?" he snapped, his voice laced with irritation. Then, as if to justify himself, he sneered, "I told you already. We'll marry once that bitch Grace is dead. With her insurance money and inheritance, we'll have everything we need." His words hung in the air like poison, each syllable piercing through me. The man I had once loved, the man I had nearly died to save, was planning my demise for financial gain. Rage bubbled within me, but I forced myself to swallow it down, concealing my fury beneath Isabel's practiced smirk. For now, Lucas believed I was his willing partner in crime. Little did he know, the woman before him was not Isabel, but the very bitch he thought he had defeated, and I was ready to make him pay. As we entered the apartment, Lucas's demeanor shifted abruptly. His hands gripped my waist possessively as he lifted me off the ground. "I can't take it anymore," he muttered, his voice thick with impatience. He carried me to the bed, his movements hurried and desperate, and began stripping me with an air of entitlement. As he fumbled with his own clothes, a sense of dread clawed at me. My mind raced for an escape. Just as he drew near, I gasped and clutched my stomach. "Ah, my stomach hurts," I said, feigning discomfort. "It's probably my period starting. We can't do this today." I softened my voice, reaching up to stroke his hair gently, my fingers trembling slightly as I planted a light kiss on his lips. The gesture seemed to momentarily placate him, though frustration flashed across his face. With a heavy sigh, he pulled up his pants, his movements jerky and annoyed. He stormed out of the apartment without another word, leaving me alone to breathe a shaky sigh of relief. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling as I clenched the sheets. I had bought myself time, but I knew his patience wouldn't last forever. Every encounter with him was a dangerous game, but one I was determined to win. The next day, when I went to the hospital, an old lady stopped me abruptly in the corridor. Her eyes glinted with an unsettling knowingness as she grabbed my arm and whispered, "Your soul will soon move back to its original place. The full moon is in 5 days." Before I could respond, she let out a low, eerie laugh and shuffled away, disappearing down the hall as though she had never been there. I stood frozen in place, her cryptic words reverberating in my mind. What did she mean? How could she possibly know about my situation? My pulse quickened, and I suddenly felt the walls of the hospital closing in on me. Shaking off the unease, I made my way to the hospital ward where my original body lay. I sank into the chair beside the bed, staring at the fragile form that used to be mine. My thoughts swirled with confusion and dread, fixating on the strange woman and her ominous warning. If her words were true, then my time in Isabel's body was limited. But what would happen to me, to Grace, when the full moon came? The questions were overwhelming, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt the sharp sting of fear clawing at my resolve. Am I going to be trapped in my paralyzed body again, powerless and voiceless, a prisoner within myself once more? Suddenly, Lucas entered the ward, his gaze immediately landing on my lifeless body lying on the hospital bed. A strange smile played on his lips, one that sent a chill down my spine. Without hesitation, he turned to me, Isabel, and kissed me, right there in front of my own body. I didn't resist this time. I allowed it deliberately, my mind racing with the implications. The act wasn't for Lucas. It was for her. My heart pounded as I watched the monitor by my body. As Lucas's lips pressed against mine, the heart rate on the monitor began to spike. A shrill alarm blared, cutting through the silence and signaling something unnatural. The nurses rushed in, their faces painted with concern as they checked the vitals of the woman who used to be me. I stepped back, watching the chaos unfold, my heart pounding as hard as the machine's beeps. Isabel, or rather, her soul, was reacting. To what? To Lucas? To me? The questions swirled in my mind, but one thing was clear. The connection between us wasn't severed yet, and the truth was clawing its way to the surface. Then I thought, even if I had to go back to my paralyzed body, I needed to expose Lucas first. That goal burned brighter than ever. Lucas and I arrived at his company together, his hand resting possessively on my lower back, as if I were his prize. As he kissed me goodbye, I seized the moment, masking my inner turmoil with a smile. Lucas, I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. I was thinking, could we hold a dinner party, a pre-celebratory banquet of sorts? It would be a great way for your partners to see your capabilities and your charisma firsthand. We could even invite some media to broadcast the event. It could really help you gain recognition. He stared at me for a long, unsettling 5 seconds before finally speaking. Right now, you're acting just like Grace, he said, his tone sharp and accusing. A wave of panic coursed through me, but I quickly masked it, forcing a scoff as I replied, "What are you talking about? How could you compare me to that pathetic woman?" I infused my voice with derision, hoping to steer his suspicions elsewhere. Are you starting to feel bad for her now? The silence that followed was tense, and I held my breath, watching as the gears turned in his mind. Finally, he gave a curt nod, his expression softening as a glimmer of ambition lit up his eyes. That's actually not a bad idea, he said thoughtfully, his tone shifting to one of calculated interest. I exhaled quietly, relief flooding me as I realized my diversion had worked. The first seeds of my plan were beginning to take root, and this dinner party would be more than just a celebration. It would be the stage to reveal Lucas for the man he truly was. He gently pinched my cheek and said, "These days you're getting smarter." I forced a polite smile, but in my mind, I retorted, "I've always been smart, Lucas. My only mistake was trusting you enough to blind myself to who you truly are." I prepared everything personally, ensuring no detail was overlooked. During this time, Lucas made several attempts to assert himself over me, or rather, over Isabel. But each time I deflected with a carefully crafted excuse. So this is how Isabel kept him tethered to her, I thought with disdain. Such a vile and manipulative tactic. My contempt for both of them grew stronger with each passing day. However, I could see the cracks in Lucas's patience widening, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. I knew that at this party, Lucas couldn't flaunt me openly. After all, he had to maintain his image as a grieving husband in front of the shareholders and investors. But I meticulously reorganized everything, ensuring that the evidence would surface at just the right moment. My plan was designed to unravel in full view of everyone present, including the media. I made sure every detail was accounted for, and every document in place, so the cameras would capture irrefutable proof of his deceit for the world to see. Today, the full moon loomed high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the city. I opened my eyes and lay in bed, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. So this is it, I murmured to myself, a mixture of determination and unease swirling within me. Tonight, I will return to my original body, and Lucas will finally face the consequences of his actions. As evening fell, the venue came alive with the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. Guests arrived in droves, their laughter and chatter filling the air. I positioned myself in an inconspicuous corner, watching as Lucas basked in the attention, playing the charismatic host with practiced ease. His smug demeanor only fueled my resolve. I reached for a glass of champagne, the coolness of the crystal against my fingers grounding me. "Now, let the show begin," I whispered under my breath, a faint smirk tugging at my lips. The stage was set, and the night promised to unveil the truth in all its raw, unfiltered glory. After the meet and greet, the media interview began with Lucas confidently showcasing his achievements and elaborating on his ambitious future plans as though they were already set in motion. However, as the presentation continued, the slideshow abruptly shifted. Photos, incriminating texts, and detailed financial records filled the screen, a damning compilation of evidence exposing the extensive fraud he had orchestrated within the company. The room erupted in shock and chaos as the truth unfolded before everyone's eyes. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment, their frenzied reporting adding to the storm of outrage. By the time Lucas realized something was amiss, it was already too late. His carefully constructed facade was shattered beyond repair. As the media swarmed Lucas, bombarding him with relentless questions, he glanced at me with a mixture of desperation and fury. I offered him a faint smile, then turned and walked out of the venue. His enraged shouts were drowned by the chaos of the press, their voices sharp and unyielding. As I stepped into the night, the moonlight bathed me in its silvery glow. A sudden wave of dizziness overtook me, and before I could steady myself, the world spun, and I collapsed just outside the gates. Concerned passers-by hurried to my side, their voices blurring into a haze as they rushed me to the hospital. When I opened my eyes, a stark realization hit me. I could move my hands again. Trembling, I lifted them, staring in disbelief at their frail skeletal form. Tears welled in my eyes as it dawned on me. I was back in my own body. With a surge of determination, I pressed the call button beside my bed. Moments later, a nurse entered the ward, her face etched with gentle concern. My recovery was grueling, each day a battle against my body and mind, but I was unyielding. I refused to let the scars of the past define me. Then, Isabel, emboldened by Lucas's fall from grace, dared to strike at me. But my plans had already accounted for her desperation. My bodyguard, always vigilant, moved swiftly, restraining her before she could get close. The media, with its relentless coverage, seized on the graphic footage of Lucas striking Isabel. The public response was swift and unforgiving, a storm of outrage that swept through every corner of society. Cornered and exposed, Isabel cracked under the pressure, her confession spilling out, implicating Lucas in the plot that had nearly cost me my life. The divorce that followed was ruthless, swift, and final. I emerged victorious, reclaiming everything: his empire, his reputation, and his bitter regret. But fate had one last twist in store. Just weeks later, Lucas met a tragic end in a car accident. It was a cruel echo of the crash that had once stolen my future, a mirrored reflection of the life he had shattered. Now, sitting alone in the grand house that had once been his, I found myself reflecting on the twisted journey that had brought me here. A life marked by betrayal, by pain, and ultimately, by a hard-earned victory. But even in triumph, there was no sweetness. The victory felt hollow, as if the ashes of the past were all that remained. Yet, I refused to let the past define me. I would rise from its shadow, carving out a future filled with joy, love, and the promise of a life that could not be tainted by the ghosts of what had been. The past was a shadow, fleeting and intangible, but the future, my future, was mine to claim. If you like this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like these only at The Drama Diaries.